In this video, I'm going to explain to you how to replace universal life insurance policies, assuming you're in the senior market like a final expense agent or something like that. My name is David Duford, owner of Duford Insurance Group, where I train and recruit agents nationally to sell things like final expense, Medicare, and annuities, both over the phone and face-to-face. So the purpose of putting together this deep dive video, we're going to go pretty deep into the side of universal life insurance replacement, is because the universal life product represents an amazing replacement opportunity for us insurance agents specializing with seniors. There's a lot of history behind the product, of which we'll go into momentarily. And what I'm going to do basically is describe what the product is like for you new agents in case you don't know. We're going to talk about the history behind the product that gives us the opportunity to replace those that were inferiorly, is that a word, designed. And then I'm going to also mention some other things about how to sell against it, if it is in bad shape or if it's in good shape, and then give you some additional resources that you can use actually in your sales presentation to convince more of your prospects, hopefully, to buy from you. So what is universal life? Pretty simple. Universal life is a kind of a permanent, flexible product. Now, what's permanent and flexible? Kind of a weird combination of words. Well, unlike whole life insurance, which fixes a premium that's not adjustable and is lifetime no matter what, a universal life offers more custom tailored provisions to the product. It can act like a permanent policy and be designed that way, where it lasts forever, or you can set it up almost like a term insurance plan where it lasts for a permanent period of time. You can also adjust the premium, so maybe you have a bad year and you don't or want to contribute the full amount into your insurance plan. You can lower the premium by a certain amount below the suggested amount. And it gives you, arguably, the people selling it would say it's a more customizable type of plan. However, the ones that were first sold back in the day, we're talking like in the 80s and 90s, were designed in a way that really has left a lot of people in a real bad position with their existing life insurance. And so what I want to shift gears on is explaining to you kind of what the environment was like in the 80s and 90s that caused these products to be sold ineffectively, and how that now has become an opportunity for a replacement. So one thing that's different than 2020 at the recording of this video, unlike today, where there's literally none of an interest rate. Back in the 80s, there was probably considered normal interest rates. We're in a weird interest rate environment. But the reason that's important is that interest rates inside of universal life insurance plans are a factor, a variable that determines what the cash value of the policy is. It's one of the contributing factors. And the way these plans were first designed is that the illustrations, which is the perspective of where the policy and how the policy would perform given that a variable would stay the same, were designed with such high levels of interest rates that it didn't take into consideration what would happen in an environment where interest rates fell and fell and fell. And that's basically what's happened over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And there have been dire consequences to the health of these insurance plans. You see, if you looked at the illustrations as they were written back in the 80s and 90s with these illustrated interest rates of 5, 6, 7% plus, they were supposed to perform at great levels and have a growing cash value that would be substantially high, used as a tax-free form of retirement or something like that, and certainly a high death benefit. But since the actual state of interest rates has been lowering and lowering and lowering, what has happened is what on paper was shown by the agent as to how it would potentially perform, keyword potential, it hasn't performed anything like that. So what have the consequences been because of these universal life plans? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. When the interest rates have not performed up to par where they should have been, that means the underlying growth of the policy has stymied. It's slowed down, and in many cases, it has actually retracted and reduced. The other variable you have here too is that with a reduction in the interest rates, the other variable or cost of insurance on these products is the actual age of the client. And as the client ages higher and higher, that cost of insuring that person at that attained age also increases. That was factored in some cases with these universal life plans, the cost of insurance at particular ages. But when you combine that ever-increasing amount with a decreasing or flatline interest rate that the product is pegged to, what you now have are products that have performed, or at least have existed, at a specific level of premium for a face amount that otherwise have been no problems until one day, many times 20, 30 years after the policy was taken out. Now the client's getting these sudden rate increases that are dramatic and will never slow down. Because what has been happening all the while is that the cash value in the plan has peaked at some point where the cost of insurance is increased and the interest rates can't keep up with covering the cost of increase. And so now the cash value is decreasing to cover the difference in price the client should be paying. And that continues on till the policy flatlines, and then that the policy can't take that cash value out of the plan to cover for the premium requirements. So then the premiums are assessed at a higher rate in order to keep the policy issued. Hopefully this all makes sense. So basically what's happened is that these agents went in and demonstrated something that was not in effect of what actually happened. No agents were around to really service these people because most agents don't last forever. They don't go back and service their clients. And all the while, our clients think their coverage was fine. And they get these statements, throw them away, and never really paid much attention to them because they didn't understand them or know how to read them. And now they're late into their years where they need insurance, but they can't afford the premiums as they escalate. The other thing, too, I'll mention before I get on to the next phase, is that also you could illustrate a specific premium level. There may have been a recommended level of premium to pay, but the agent may have illustrated it lower than that recommended amount, even though he knew that it would contribute to a lapse earlier than expected. But the agent did it because that's how he got the sale. And he would say things like, hey, look, I can get you whole life insurance for half the price, because that was the pitch made. And obviously, this has all been a disaster. It's taken a couple of decades. There's been class action lawsuits. There's been, problems big time. And that leads us to where we are today. There are clients out there with these universal life plans that are in their 70s and 80s, mostly, that are just dying on the vine. They need life insurance. They don't know what to do. And they are just getting these letters now. There's a lot of other ones, too, that aren't yet to the breaking point. They're still paying the premium they always did, but they will eventually start to see these price increases and won't know how to do it. So that is how the history of universal life has worked. This hopefully has painted the problem, the picture of what is out there. And what I'm going to do for you now is kind of explain to you what you need to do, the steps you need to take now that you understand how the old universal life plans worked and how to address them factually and inspire the client, hopefully, to drop what they have in lieu of getting something from you. So the first thing you want to do is obviously always do policy reviews. Even if the client says, I have whole life insurance, I'm fine, I've had it forever with XYZ company, always ask for a policy review, demand it really. Because many times what they think they have is not what they actually have. And again, if you've been in this business long enough, you know that's the case. What you're looking for when you look at a policy to review it, let's say they haven't had a price increase. They'll get mad and say, I got this price increase, I've had this policy forever. Once you look at the plan, sometimes they're called flexible, adjustable whole life policies. Sometimes they're called a flexible, adjustable universal life premiums. It depends on the companies. It won't say, it may say just flat out universal life. But flexible, adjustable, those are also words to describe what it does as well. What you want to look at, as well as with the policy, is to also ask for annual statements your clients have received. I'll simply ask clients, I'll say, hey, this policy probably sent you some letters in the mail about kind of giving you a checkup about how the plan works. Ask for those. The companies send these out as kind of CYA because inside that cover letter or that annual statement about their universal life policy, there is language in most cases in the fine print away from where the client would obviously see it that has language about when the plan is expected to, how long the plan is expected to last in a best case scenario given circumstances stay the same and what we know at the time of that statement, and then also the worst case scenarios. So if you dig around and look through it, eventually you'll see on the statement where it says, In the best case scenario, this plan is going to lapse at 2025. In the worst case scenario, it's going to lapse January 2021. And so what I like to do strategically is operate off of worst case scenarios. I think we hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So I think it's important to get an idea of what actually may happen. And especially if this is off into the distance, it's smart to plan for the worst with insurance, because that's what insurance is about anyway, planning for the worst case scenarios. So this will give you proof that their so-called permanent plan actually is designed to cancel. The other thing that you'll see, especially more clearly if you have multiple statements, a lot of these clients will keep them and store them in some box somewhere, is to demonstrate how the cash value is actively decreasing. You will see a gradual decrease in the cash value. And that should cause them concern, because if they're not borrowing money from it, why is the cash value going down? Well, that brings me back to my other point, where if a client is aging higher and what the premium currently is being paid cannot match what it costs to keep it in force, then it will extract that money out of the cash value. So what you're showing the client is a landmine waiting to blow. It may take years sometimes, but once that cash value hits zero, every cost increase is assessed by an increase in the payment in order to keep the policy current. So these are all signs to show the client and explain for them to get upset and to scare them, really. Because if they do nothing, they're not going to solve the problem. And part of doing nothing, the problem there is when they have the opportunity to do something later in life with bad health, they may not have an opportunity to do anything. At least that could cover them from the first day. So when I'm selling a client that has a price increase, he's complaining that his universal life policy is going up right now, I'll do all the same things. I'll explain to him the same things I told you. And I'll make it clear to him that his policy ain't going to stop going up. It's just going to go higher and higher and higher. And I ask him, how do you feel about paying more premiums? How do you think you could pay for more premiums? What if you live another 10 years? Could you even pay the premium increases? I want him to get mad, because what he was promised was not the case. This is how it usually is. Most agents aren't like, yeah, this thing's going to go up in your 70s. Otherwise, they would have never bought it. This is kind of hidden from them when they first took it out, because I want the prospect to see his situation as it is. It doesn't get better by avoiding paying the premium on a permanent policy that I would sell him. If you avoid this problem, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are a lot of people that have had to cancel their coverage too because of it. So I do this, and it's usually easy to get the client motivated to replace his UL policy with me because of this, simply because he can't take the pain of premium increases anymore. I had a case where the guy started off paying $30 a month on a $30,000 UL back in the 80s. And at 75, he was now paying $200 a month for $30,000. And I replaced his coverage. I got him $9,000 in coverage for $150 a month because he had waited so long. And he actually admitted, it's nice to hear this every once in a while, an agent came in and said, you should replace this thing's going to blow up. And he told me, he's like, man, I wish I would have listened to this agent. And I'm like, yeah, well, at least you still have time, because a lot of people don't. So it should be simpler to replace it based off of that. The big hurdle to get over is many times going from a UL policy to a smaller face amount on whole life is painful, $30,000 to $9,000 in my example. But you know, the key thing that you have to do and be persuasive about is explaining, like, you get older, it just gets less. Your health doesn't get better, it just gets worse. And this is an opportunity right now to change this, because if you outlive this thing or can't stand the premium increases, what's $30,000 worth if you can't actually, die with it active? It's worth zero. And then a lot of money wasted for nothing. So you have to sell that part, and that takes a bit of persuasion. The biggest difficulty is when you try to sell this when they don't have current problems. And it takes you having kind of a level of comfort in going through all of the same things and explaining to the client exactly the same things that are going to happen and project to them the problems that are going to come from it. One strategy to use is maybe not even necessarily replace the plan, but sell a smaller whole life plan, maybe just to get some kind of permanent coverage right now. Because one of the excuses or objections you'll hear from prospects is, well, I got 5 more years, I'm pretty healthy, I'm 70, I don't think I'm going anywhere in the next 5 years. I like this amount of coverage, I really want to keep it. So it becomes a lot more challenging, because if they're paying, $50 a month for $30,000 and you can only take them to get $30,000, it's going to cost a male probably, $200. It's a very high thing to overcome because they're stuck to their budget too, right? So I'll sell some coverage is better than nothing. Let's start with a little permanent coverage while you're healthy, and let's look at adding some closer to the cancellation date. At least you can start off with a little bit of something. And that sometimes is a good play. Other times you need to call up the company, and this is especially useful if you can't get an annual statement. Call the company directly, play dumb, ask the company, what is this plan? How does it work? What happens if the client keeps paying these premiums? Is there a risk of the premiums going up? Is there a risk of the cash value reaching zero? When is this projected to cancel? What is the best case scenario, the worst case scenario of cancellation? And you need to have the company rep explain this to the client, because there's no better sales pitch than a company rep telling you how bad their coverage is. And that will happen. And the client, the client will just be like, this is crazy. This is junk. Okay, so last point here, I'm going to leave below a link to a Wall Street Journal article. I think that's what it is. They wrote it a couple of years ago, a very detailed discussion about exactly what we talked about in long read format. It'll give you a lot of perspective on the history of universal life, the scam in a sense that was propagated by a lot of agents and silently endorsed by insurance carriers, and the kind of travails that follow from the people who depend on these plans even to today. To give you more conviction, I think when you're sitting at the table with a Mrs. Jones and she's got one of these plans and in your heart of hearts it's a bad deal and you should replace it. So check that link out. And that's how we look at replacing universal life. I ran into it less and less over the years. I think it's on a downward tick as far as how they were designed. They were kind of revamped. A lot of the universal life plans today are better designed to prevent a lot of this kind of shenanigans that have happened to seniors now. But you will still run into it. And it's a more complex replacement. There's a lot more moving parts, but the sales that you get from these are a lot bigger. And truly, you fix a client's problem with not having peace of mind, because these plans are designed to blow up. And many times the clients outlive them. And what was promised isn't delivered. As much as it is a shame, you're in a position to really help these people. If you like this kind of training, this is what I do every day in my insurance agency. I help my agents better understand their competition, how to sell insurance, how to persuade a client to buy so they understand it's in their best interest to own the policy that the client, my agent, sells versus what another competitor of ours would sell them. So if you like this kind of thing, training is the bedrock of my agency. Learn more about how my agency works at one of the links above or below. The Wall Street Journal article is going to be in the comment section below or in the details tab. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And otherwise, I hope you learned something a little bit out of this video. And thanks for your time. We'll see you later. Bye.